I'm glad to welcome you to another lesson where we'll get acquainted with the concept of reusable workflow. A reusable workflow is something that allows us to create workflows and use them as a kind of template or pattern. And this separate workflow can be located either in our repository or in a completely different repository, and we will be able to connect and use it in the current repository. Let's demonstrate this in practice. Right now, we're going to create two workflows in the current repository. One will serve as a kind of template, and the other will be the one that calls this very workflow. So the first one I have is the workflow that serves as a template. It's called reusable. I'll give it an appropriate name. I'll set a trigger for it. The key difference here is the presence of a special trigger called workflow call. It specifically indicates that this workflow will be called by another workflow, but it won't be triggered by a push or other conditions. So we pass the workflow call as an event. As part of the instructions in this workflow, I'll be asking for some input, and then I'll log it. So we connect the keyword inputs, which is an essential step in the process. Let's say, for instance, that I want to pass a title to the system. This title will be accompanied by a detailed description that provides more context and clarity about the content or subject matter being addressed. It will have a type for the field. It will have a default value. And it will have a require field. This field is optional. You can pass an empty value. Next, we'll write the jobs. So we lost the breakpoints here. The instructions for the jobs will be very simple. We're going to try to log what we're passing, so I'm using console. Log as the ID for the job. I'm going to run this on Ubuntu, and I'll write the next step as part of the sequential steps. So it is indeed a lowercase letter. I will give it a descriptive name. Print the title clearly because I want to log a specific title, and I'll run the command. In this explanation, I am focusing on addressing the echo issue by using the inputs context expression. This approach is essential for managing the echo effectively. Furthermore, I will make sure to include the title, as it is important for the overall understanding and context of the discussion. My reusable workflow is ready. It will simply ask for a title to the system in a straightforward manner, and then proceed to log it accordingly. Now let's create a workflow that will call this workflow and consequently run it. We're creating a new workflow. We're giving it a name. We're setting the trigger for when we want to run it. We're going to run it on a manual trigger in particular. So I'm passing workflow dispatch as an event specifically. Next, since we're going to use this particular workflow, and this workflow asks us for necessary data, we copy that necessary data and request it from the user, that is, from us ourselves. And we basically start the jobs. So essentially, we're going to use it as the ID for the job call workflow. Next, we need to specify which workflow to use, so we use the keyword uses and set the path to that workflow. And since this workflow is in the same repository, we set the path from the root. We have a folder called GitHub Workflows, and the file is called workflow uses. So just like we set the path, we also need to pass parameters. In order to achieve the desired outcome, it is essential that we pass the specific input parameter that we are currently requesting at this point in the process, ensuring that it is accompanied by the appropriate value, which in this case is input.title. This step is crucial for the successful execution of the task at hand. That's it. Our two workflows are ready. So this is a kind of template that is called by another workflow. And here we directly call the workload. Note that we don't have the infrastructure launch here because we're calling an external workload, where the infrastructure is already being launched and certain instructions are being executed. Let's push this and test it. We go into the action, nothing happens. I disabled the previous lesson. This is 17 and it's running in manual mode. We look for it in the list and it needs to be started manually. Besides that, we're passing a custom title. By default, you see the title and changing it to a personal one. And I start the workflow. And in the end, we should see the custom title in the logs. The workflow has definitely started. We can absolutely even open it and watch the logs. Unfortunately, the workflow got stuck yet again because I missed the letter T here for the umpteenth time, as usual. That's why it got stuck. Let's run it one more time again. Let's go back. We refresh, nothing starts. We need to go into S17 and start it manually. We write a custom value, start the workflow, and go into it. Yes, this time Ubuntu is spelled correctly. It's starting now. Everything is happening very quickly. And we see on the screen that we're getting the custom title, which is the title we passed through one workflow and displayed on the screen through another. This is the simplest principle of using reusable workflow. Now let's do something similar, but in a different repository. So we're going to create a new repository. Let's say this repository will just be for storing various workflows, different templates we can use in our practice. All right, we have a separate repository. Let's create a new workflow in it. Let me absolutely, completely, and totally remove everything from this particular spot, indeed, without a doubt. And I'll just copy it. My code from here, and I'll work directly through the editor in the browser, so I don't have to clone the repository to my local machine. So it's going to be called exactly the same, reusable workflow. It will be called during the call, workflow call. I'm going to pass it some secrets this time. So instead of input, we're using secrets. In the secrets, I'm going to pass some kind of password. So I specify the ID, password, and this field will have some description. And there will be a require parameter that will ask for this field. And in the jobs we'll be running on Ubuntu latest, we're going to print this password as steps. As you remember from previous lessons, the password, or rather the secrets themselves, won't be printed out, but will be displayed as asterisks. This means that there is a value there and we are successfully retrieving it. So in any case, we'll try to output it. In this tutorial, we will be demonstrating how to effectively and efficiently access the secrets context by utilizing the keyword password. This process is crucial for maintaining security. This is one step. And one more step. I want to show you guys the context in GitHub so you can see which repository we will have in the context of GitHub. It will be the current repository, or now the repository from which we are calling this workflow. So the name in GitHub I'm specifically speaking, referring to the context of GitHub in the broader sense of the platform, which is a popular code hosting service. And the GitHub context is an object for me. But to see it in the logs, I'll convert it to a readable format using TOJSON. We can also create a separate job to display the repository files, and we'll additionally make sure which repository is being used when working with this reusable block. Let's compose it in a detailed manner and thoroughly go back to the job level. In order to successfully use the checkout, copy the repository, I have decided to appropriately name this particular job as checkout. I will run it in Ubuntu latest in this video tutorial and outline the comprehensive step-by-step detailed process for it using the operating system. We're also passing the version and the command that will display the list of files we've copied to the working directory in our process. So everything looks right and ensure. Everything is in order. Let's carefully give this workflow a name and accurately commit the changes. Nothing is going to run in this repository right now because our workflow is not triggered by a push, but rather it's called And now we have a separate repository. In this separate repository, there's a workflow, a reusable workflow that we can use as a template. Here we're requesting secrets, and then when we call it, let's not forget to pass the secrets. Let's go back to our main repository, GitHub Actions. Next, let's check if we have a secret created. I think in the previous lessons we have a secret with the key password. Yes, we have the secret. We don't need to create it. Let's go to Actions and head to the editor for the current file. We'll add another job. I'm naming it Call External Workflow. Next, I'm using user to connect the workflow. Our current workflow is already in a different repository, so we'll make the path not from the root, but we'll use the repository ID. The repository ID is essentially a combination of the login and the repository name, which means that we have the login name as Krikov and the repository is named accordingly, and then the path to the directory is GitHub Workflows, and our file is also named workflow.yaml, referring to the main branch. And now, as far as I can see, it finds this path perfectly without any issues or errors. This ensures that the system can accurately locate and access the necessary files and directories without any complications or hindrances. In the next configuration parameter, we're passing the secrets, along with additional details about how they should be handled. So for the secrets, I used password as the key. Not password or something I don't remember, but I'll get in here, click on it, and open it in a new window. So, password, and I'll pass it the password. I'm referring to the context of secrets, and in the context of secrets, I also have the key password. So these keys are different. They matched for me, but it can be any word at all. I just set that key. Great, I currently have two parallel workflows. One triggers a third-party reusable workflow that's in the current repository. The other one triggers a workflow that's in an external repository. And now let's push and commit these changes. Let's push and commit these changes. They all left. Let's go into our main GitHub action. Let's go into Actions. Nothing is happening. Let's go into Workflow 17. Let's trigger it manually. Let's pass some value for the custom title. We've started it. Let's go into it. We see that two workflows are running, but we have three jobs because there are actually two jobs externally. So the first one ran successfully. We see the triples that we set on the screen. The second workflow, the console output showed an error. The command was written incorrectly. Checkout, it was successful. And in the checkout, notice that we have the index files, we have the package, which means the checkout returns the files from the current repository. This means that it's not using this new repository, but rather it's just taking the file physically from there, executing the instruction, but all of this is happening within the territory of this repository. Let's figure out why it didn't output for us. Let's edit it. Edit done. Run 17. Console confirm success. On GitHub, see repo. Actions understood from files. Uses template 4. Now let's run 17. The console shows that it was executed successfully, and let's see what's on our screen. So, in the context of GitHub, we see the repository, something about GitHub Actions, but we've already figured that out by looking at the files. It just takes it as a template and uses the workflow, but all of this is executed in the current repository. Now, let's take a look at the secret. Our secret is also returned. Here are the stars displayed in the logs. The reusable workflow also allows us to return output, and we can get it in this workflow. Up to this point, we were just running some commands at the job level, and they were simply displayed in the console log, but that was at the job level. But if we indeed need to return some output, we can do that. Let's simulate it now and create a new step. In this initial step, we are simply going to generate something that we will eventually return later on. Let us call it generate output. we are going to execute it on Ubuntu latest as a step. We are going to create a variable with a specific value and then pull it into the output file. Remember, we created a variable in a very similar way and passed it through a default variable, writing it to a file, and that's exactly what we're doing now. We're creating a variable called date, and we're assigning it the value of the current date, like this, and this file is written like this. Next, for this step, I'll create an ID so that we can refer to it. Now we have a specific step that creates some output, meaning it creates a variable called date. Now we need to put this date variable into the output of the entire workflow. But in order to put it into the workflow, I need to place it in the job output. So for the job, I specify the output and create this variable in the output at the job level. Referring to the contextual framework of steps, specifically in the process of then to the ID of this specific step, then to the outputs field, and finally to the specific variable date. Now I essentially have outputs at the job level, and I'm basically passing it to the workflow level. I'm going up higher to the sky and writing outputs, creating amazing results. This is my very important key date, and here is its value. And I get the value already from the level of the jobs. Next, the jobs generate output using this step, generate output. So I'm referring to the step generate output. Now I will proceed to carefully extract the necessary outputs from this particular step. My final key is date. Now this workflow will also include the output. Let us proceed to get this output in our current workflow. So we have a separate job here that uses the workflow. As you can see, in our current setup, we are already in the process of generating this specific output. Now, let us proceed to initiate the creation of a completely new and separate job, which will be designed to specifically refer to this output. Therefore, I will now proceed to execute the current step on the Ubuntu operating system. It is necessary for me to patiently wait for this process to reach its completion in order to successfully obtain that output. So, I specify the ID of a specific step down here, so it doesn't run in parallel, but waits for completion. And now I already have access to the output, which is important for further processing and analysis. This access allows me to print it to the console, providing a way to verify and inspect the data. I'm referring to the context of needs, then to the step called workflow. In this step, it has output, and I refer to it and extract the date key from the output, which we set up in the chain. We've ended up with such a long chain, but it allows us to pass parameters which are essential for the operation. And let's push this now in order to successfully complete the task. Let's go to the repository. Let's open 7. Let's run it. We're not going in. Let's note that the local workflow already has 2 steps. It's successfully completed. So at this step we start recording the date in a file, and in the last step we retrieve it and see it in the logs. And a little final check. We have a workflow that is running. It calls one external workflow that has 2 jobs, and a second external workflow that also has 2 jobs. And then there's another job, the third job, which simply uses this workflow and refers to its outputs and displays them on the screen. So we get the first job, which contains 2 jobs, because it calls them, and there are 2 of them. The second job also has 2 jobs, since the external workflow has 2 jobs as well. And the last job simply outputs the current date that we wrote in the first job in a separate workflow. That's it for this lesson.